former defensive lineman Kyle Searle, former football operations Dan Cobb, and Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Hess. We are going to break down last season, 2023 football season, as we did last year. I kind of want to wait until that June, July phase to recap it so that we don't have any emotions and hostility if we recap this in December, for example. So we had a good 6 months to kind of sleep on it and give our opinions a little bit without emotion, if that makes sense. But before we get there, just a few announcements. First is, of course, on Instagram. Please follow us, Whitetown Penguin Podcast. And we are live tonight on YouTube Live. So please chime in on YouTube Live. Give us your feedback. Sterl's watching that chat. And as we break down month by month on last season, we invite you to also chime in and give your opinion on each game. A couple quick news that came out. First is a scheduling news, some scheduling changes brought to you by FBSschedules.com. A few changes being made. We are now going to open the 2025 season with Mercyhurst Lakers. We are going to pay them $100,000 to come to Stanbaugh Stadium and play us. That was initially Butler, but Butler is no longer playing us on that date. So TBA on if and when we will be playing Butler. Also, we did a home and home series with Towson Tigers. They are part of the CAA, which for those of you who don't know, that's the Villanova Richmond Conference. That's a very strong conference, and they're a pretty competitive team in the conference. But we will be going to them September 20th of 2025. And in return, they will be coming to Youngstown in 2028. Just to kind of chime in, the rest of that 2025 schedule is Michigan State and Robert Morris. So that's our out of conference for 2025. Mercyhurst, Towson, Michigan State, Robert Morris. One more note is on 2026, we are slated to play Kentucky. However, I'm assuming because of the SEC expansion, Kentucky has requested that we now open up against them Labor Day weekend, which is going to cost them a $50,000 fee, which we are going to forward on to St. Francis, as we were supposed to be playing them that date, but they are bumping backward to September 16th. So that's the scheduling changes that were just announced recently for the Penguins. But one more note that we kind of mentioned, if you tuned in last episode, talking to athletic director Ron Strollo, we mentioned Murray State as they are moving up to the CUSA. And ironically, not too long after that move, their athletic director, Kyle Motes, just announced that he is departing for Eastern Kentucky as their athletic director. I'm not to say which program's better or worse, but I am going to opinionate that that is more of a demotion. And really, before we get down to the breakdown 2023, open table to my co-host. What are y'all's thoughts on that crazy turn of events? Unexpected, I guess.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start real quick. I mean, honestly, I don't have much to say about Missouri State and Eastern Kentucky. I think I know a little bit more about Missouri State than EKU, but it just seems like the college football landscape right now, and Sal, to your point, it probably is a demotion in one way or another, but we don't know the conversations that happen behind closed doors. Did he not want Missouri State to move up into the FBS, and all of a sudden he has a disgruntled relationship with a board member or somebody? They had a big disagreement, and he could have been the one who said, fine, I'm looking elsewhere and I'm moving around. And there's just so much instability right now in college football that the move doesn't surprise me. I don't think it affects us very much. We just, we seem to have a culture with Coach Phillips and Ron Strollo that kind of keep as many of our big time players intact. Players, not just like on the field, but also players around the university. So, yeah, I mean, it's just the instability of college football, and there's another prime example.
Yeah, and Kurt, that's a great point. And just to expand on the point of may have been a disagreement between board members or whatever. We talked to Strollo on the last episode, and just the difference between our budget versus a MAC budget. There's a big discrepancy there. And like you said, athletic director might want to do it, might not want to do it. But making up that gap in budget is a challenge that I don't think a lot of people think about. So it might just be, all right, well, I got you guys to the FBS where you wanted. I'm going to go elsewhere and, that has an established budget instead of trying to figure out coming up with the funds to, continue growing and moving into the FBS level.
Well, Cyril comes up with a great point. Like, we all know coaches, and one of the coaches, that we know pretty well has had examples of that where an athletic director kind of wanted to take a schedule to another level and compete against bigger, tougher teams, do it more often during the season. And in turn, a lot of his roster and his players were getting hurt. So he felt like, I can't compete at my conference level. I can't play against the people who I have to beat to try to get to a championship level, because you're trying to bring in so much money to the athletic program, or you're trying to challenge all these big schools that we can't necessarily compete with. And so there's just this huge gap between athletic administration and your coaching staff. And I don't think that that's successful for any program across the country.
Yeah, those are all good points. I mean, it's funny to think at one time EKU was at the FCS level was one of the teams to beat back in the day, when Truss was here. Or no, wasn't, I forget the coach name. The stadium's named after him, but they were a heck of a program. But who knows what Missouri State moving up. I think you guys might have nailed it. Maybe he didn't want any part of that. And maybe someone there at EKU realized this guy's pretty good and they went and got him. But man, I don't know. It's just crazy around the country right now.
Keep in mind, I know we talked to Strollo last show, but last summer, we had Commissioner Patty on, who explained to us, hey, guys, I don't think people realize because not only, forget the $5 million fee, forget that you got to pay more, that you're in a higher conference, forget that you have to put fans in the stands and sell tickets and may or may not need a larger stadium than what they have, may have the expansion. But one thing I never thought about that Patty explained was they're going from 60 to 85 scholarships, right? So you're going to have to tack on 25 more scholarships. And on Title IX, that means now you have to add probably a couple new women's team on top of all this expansion. That's even more money that you're investing. So, yeah, like you guys said, I don't know if the athletic director did it to make the boosters happy and then they forced them out once they saw the bill, or the other way around, he did what they wanted to and said, all right, I'm not dealing with this financial mess, and he headed out. But
yeah, and there's a lot of hidden costs, and it's not just a football decision at that point. Like, yeah, it sounds nice to be into that FBS bracket, but like you said, you're not going to be competing or relevant in your conference for a few seasons. And, we've already kind of established that there's three conferences that are competing at the FBS level for a national championship, maybe four. But, why do you want to go up if you have no aspirations to – there's never going to be an aspiration to win a national championship. It's just going to be like, well, let's try and get 3 losses this year or something stupid like that. And then the Title IX thing, adding the scholarships, is another hidden expense that it's, once again, not just a football move.
right.
Well, on a side note there, it's 63 scholarships at the FCS level, so they're going to go to 85. But I think everything's on the table with this NIL and paying the athletes and where this direction's going. Title IX, I don't know if that'll hold like it has been in the past, because if this turns into a revenue generating deal, it's going to be the bigger, the Power Fives or the Power Two, whatever you call. If it's revenue generated that they'll pay the athletes off their revenue, then what sports generate enough revenue to pay their athletes? And NCAA has nothing to do with this anymore. They're they're on borrowed time right now. So legally, that's how this all came about. It's a antitrust deal, and you talk to people in the know there, and I don't know, man. I don't think it's just going to be, they're talking about eliminating walk-ons. I don't think that'll ever happen, but it's going to be roster type management based on revenue. So Title IX might not just, the SEC, I don't think cares about anybody's rules. So just to throw that out there, that I don't think just because you go up doesn't mean you're going to have to add another sport. I think those days are changing.
No doubt. The
honestly,
Tennessee investigation was a perfect example you're talking about, Dan. Kind of like the SEC thing.
NCAA has no forceability anymore. They were a police kind of group for the universities that chose to be in the NCAA. And you guys know how I feel about this. Sal and I, when we were there coaching, doing what we were doing, couldn't buy Kurt and Kyle a cheeseburger from across the street at McDonald's. And now they're paying these athletes $1 million a year. And so the NCAA's, whatever you want to call it, they've been on borrowed time. Now I don't know, man. I think it's going to be interesting. So, but that's for another.
I think the NCAA is going to get creative to hang around as long as possible. But I mean, what was the original fee to move up from FCS to FBS? Wasn't it 50,000 or 500,000?
5,000.
I think it was $5,000 to $5 million.
Yeah.
And where's that money go to? The NCAA, I'm assuming.
Yeah, of course.
And so what's the justification of raising it from $5,000 where it stood forever to $5 million after X amount of teams dropped?
Patty explained. Well, from what I remember, Patty explained the difference was everyone was jumping because it was pocket change at the time, and you wrote out a plan on, I'll abide by Title IX within 5 years, and here's my 5-year plan. And so everyone was moving up, taking the checks, and then investing later, which is I don't want to say a BS way to do it, but they're basically borrowing money from the bank to invest later on, which is it's not the proper way to do it. So they put the rule in place that, hey, we need the money now. You need the scholarships now before you go up.
Well, I think Patty brought that up too, is this was to shrink the amount of teams, because this is just, in my opinion, what the hell do I know? But it's like, it's the roadmap to have the top 70, I don't know, 60, 70, 80, 50, whatever number it is at that level that are in a college football playoff. As we all know, the NCAA has nothing to do with the college football playoff. It's not the NCAA championship. It's the college football playoff. March Madness still runs under the NCAA. The college football playoff has nothing to do with NCAA. So this is maybe their way of saying in 2 years, and I'm just going to be way wrong. There's 70 teams now. Everybody else, figure it out. It's really going to get interesting, but
the FCS playoff does run under the NCAA.
What's that?
The FCS playoff does run under the NCAA.
Yeah, and so does Division II and Division III.
Right.
But so that's because March Madness pays for that. You understand that, like Mount Union and all these teams, they can't afford to fly across the country and play in a championship. That's all supported by the NCAA's moneymaker, which is March Madness. Sure. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's going to get interesting, man. It's maybe in a sad way too, but.
I think Kurt kind of alluded to this, and I think Strollo mentioned it towards the end. Maybe it was towards the end of the show or off air. Is you might see some teams go up and come back down because they realize they can't hang. Really, and especially if teams are realizing, like, well, I'm not in one of the 4 conferences, and I never have a possibility of getting an invite to one of the 4 conferences. So why would I, spend this amount of money when our teams can be on a smaller budget and competing for national titles? And you probably won't see too many teams do it, but I bet you do.
Let's think about Missouri State specifically. Like, we're very pro Missouri Valley Conference here on this podcast. So we want to give teams that stay in our conference the benefit of the doubt. But they're about as average of a program as we've had in our conference ever since we were introduced to them in 2008, 2009, right? So if you get an athletic administration in there that wants to make a change, you're not going to do what Western Illinois did, which is move to a lesser conference. You don't see any growth with your football program in your current conference. So it's, the definition of insanity, right? Like, you have to try something different. And I don't know if the Conference USA has a TV deal, but something we haven't mentioned is like the TV deals are also paying a lot of that money. So if you sign up to be a part of this conference, maybe this conference has some kind of contract that pays a ton of money. If you're involved in that, then that helps your scholarship. That builds you with more women's sports programs, because if they stayed in the Missouri Valley, none of that growth is probably happening. They have a 15-year resume of mediocre.
You're right. One last thing is, and I read this, was told it too. Ohio State's NIL budget, and I'm not 100% on the number. I think it was like 14 million. Illinois was less, or not Illinois, Minnesota. Theirs was less than $1 million. So it's the haves and the have-nots, right? I mean, so what is going to happen? To your point, Kurt, you brought up a great point. Missouri State had to try something different, but like Kyle said, is it going to work, or will they be back down? So, sorry, Sal. I know we want to move.
Gertie, to answer your question, the CUSA has a TV contract with ESPN and CBS, because they're doing the CBS midweek games now to compete with the MAC, and the payout's $750,000 a year to the teams.
Per team or divided among the teams?
No, per team. I mean, put it in perspective. The ACC's making $36 million per team, and they're like half of where they need to be. Anyway, that's more
than our money games, right? Like, I think we took $800,000 from Ohio State. Did we take $800,000 from Ohio State? So, like,
yeah, but they're going to do that too. They're going to schedule their Ohio State games.
Yeah, so now you get. I don't know. I don't know the right answer.
Yeah. Anyway, let's transition. Over to Cyril.
Oh, hey, yeah, thanks, Sal. So, show's brought to you by our sponsors, Leiden Oil Company. Once again, just going to thank Paul and Laura Leiden, Paul Jr., Jen Leiden. We could do it without them, but we're glad we don't have to do it without them. So, we got a few expenses on the show that Paul and Laura gladly picked up. Big fans of the program and all the university. So what's Paul saying? Fueling the best for success. And he truly believes that about all Penguin athletes, and just really loves Penguin sports.
Thank you. All right, we're going to recap the 2023 football season. As you know, it was a successful one as the Penguins reached the postseason for the first time since our title run in 2016. Very exciting to see that Coach Phillips has a program going in the right direction. Definitely going to break down this season, and in order to kind of make it interesting for everybody, we're going to break down 1 month at a time, and our hosts in order are just going to really pick the ones that they feel meant most important to them, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on Valparaiso, for example. So looking at September, just quick recap for everyone. We opened against Valparaiso on a Thursday night, won 52-10. Went to Ohio State, lost 35-7. Hosted Robert Morris, won 48-28. We had a bye week. And then we started conference play at Northern Iowa, where we lost a heartbreaker 44-41. And that's how our September went. Curdy, break one of those games down. You think that kind of stood out to you?
Yeah, just to start, I'm hoping, some of my other co-hosts will tackle that UNI game a little bit. They may get a little bit more heated than me. So I'm going to go off, and since I'm in Columbus, I'm going to talk about
Who are you
Ohio
referencing,
State.
Kurt?
Nobody specifically. But I'll start with Ohio State. I really enjoyed the Ohio State experience. I thought it was great. Sal flew in. Kyle was down here. We kind of made it a big trip and launched Youngstown Penguin podcast a little bit, had a big tailgate. And so very memorable time for all of us. Obviously, the score 35-7. But early on, you could tell being in that stadium, there were a lot of disgruntled Ohio State fans early. We caused some problems. We put together a drive or two. Had our opportunities early on. And the real reason, thinking about and reflecting on this game, mostly was that the talent for us is there. There's not a huge drop off between our first and their first early in the season almost. But where we always kind of lose to these bigger teams, Ohio State, Michigan State, Kentucky, is that depth kind of catches up with us where they're exchanging a lot of people on their D line. They're playing a lot of linebackers, defensive backs, and, they have 4 or 5 star receivers across the board. So really, I think that that's indicative of our 2023 season based on what talent level Coach Phillips is able to bring in. We are able to compete with some of the best in the country. Ohio State specifically is top 4, top 8 team every year. So we kind of lose in terms of depth and the drop off that we have maybe from our 1s to 2s. So I think that 2023 season shows what talent we had, both offensively and defensively. The early boos, the early disgruntled Buckeye fans really had them thinking for a second, like, oh, crap, we don't even know who our quarterback's going to be. We had the better quarterback that day, right? Like Mitch Davison outperformed both of those Ohio State quarterbacks. And, we had defensive plays that were being made. We had sacks. We were able to stop the run. The talent level for us in 2023 was there. Besides that, they got 4 and 5 stars across the board. So really that game makes me think of the talent level and the culture that Coach Phillips has brought in, that we can compete with a top 4, top 8 team, despite being a 35-7. It wasn't a very easy 35-7 for about 2.5 to 3 quarters. If we were if you were in Columbus watching that game, and Buckeye fans were pretty upset.
DK.
Yeah, I had to go Northern Iowa. I think probably Kurt was alluding, both me and someone else probably shared that view, but it was the game. And obviously, Kurt, a lot of great stuff there about Ohio State, but I had kind of thought Northern Iowa was our barometer game because of just the history and the depth of our conference. And like Kurt said, not only at Ohio State, but at Northern Iowa, I thought we closed the gap considerably. Like when the game was on TV, we came out, we looked physical, we were up early. Something that hadn't happened in a long time at Northern Iowa. If you think about it, if someone would have told me 2 nights before the game or a night before the game that YSU was going to score 41 points and not win, I would have been shocked. I think I was looking at some of the stats. We had 418 yards of total offense. Just incredible to think. When was the last time we did that against a Northern Iowa team there? Really the last time we probably played them that close there was 2012 or 13, guys. What year was that with you? 12, yeah, maybe 13. I think it was 13. 13, yeah. So we were there, and really at the beginning of the game, it looked like, wow, we might roll this team, And so that to me was the barometer at that point in the year, and we showed up. Again, we were physical. We held within the line of scrimmage. We were making big plays. Mitch, Bryce played well. We were running the ball. It was the whole thing. And then, unfortunately, there were a couple of plays there down the stretch that just bit us. But, man, it was a brutal loss, but it was good to see that we went out there, scored 41 points, dominated in certain areas, and just at the end, we couldn't pull it out. But that was the game I thought that jumped out to me in that early part of the year.
Before I comment on that, Cyril, you have the same game?
That's the one I'm going to highlight. I got a little bit to say about all of it, but
well, let me say one thing. I didn't pick UNI. I picked a different game, but on that UNI, Dan, y'all remembered that we won the first and third quarter. They won the second and fourth. Like you said, we came out fired up first quarter. dominated, and then they adjusted, and then we adjusted second half, and then yeah, man, that was hard to watch. Good fought back and forth. Like that was a great game for both teams.
We were kind of learning how to win a big game like that, and
correct.
We hadn't done that, and I thought it was a step in with Coach Phillips. The program had taken that step to where, okay, there were years why she went out to Northern Iowa, and it was ugly. So much like with what when you guys played, Kurt and Kyle, that when we went and beat Pitt, there was ways we just didn't have a play or two and a penalty or two and couldn't pull it out. But it was there were moments in that game where it was like, wow, this team's going to be pretty good. So go ahead, Kyle. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So just speaking on the whole month of September, starting on August 31st, August, September, we all sat here and did our prediction in the summer, and we knew we were going to be 2-1 going into Northern Iowa. And, the first three games speak for himself. Like, yes, I'm glad we played Ohio State tough. We made some things difficult for them. We grew and played competitive football against the Big Ten team with national championship aspirations. So, like Kurt said, the 7-35 loss was a hard fought, 35 points for the Buckeyes, I think. I had the Penguins beating Northern Iowa preseason. I thought this team was set up to do that. I thought this schedule was set up for us to do that. Like I said before, this was the most favorable schedule I have seen YSU have since I stepped on a campus in 2009. The loss to Northern Iowa still really it just grinds my gears because we were right there, and we don't have too many games like that with Northern Iowa. But to the point that Kopp said, I think we learned a lot about ourselves in that game. I think we took the lead in that game twice. Once late, and then it just slipped away from us in the fourth quarter. So it's one or two plays, not one or two quarters, which has been the deciding factor against Northern Iowa historically. So the Northern Iowa game, tough pill to swallow. Getting into the next month, I think it explains itself. Like the team really bounced back well from it and took a lot of good learning points away from it.
The game I picked, Kurt, I had the same mindset as you. I assumed everyone was going to take UNI, so I too took Ohio State. Pro and con from it. One con is as people's schedules for these games to get reps, right? And we did not let that happen. We killed the clock, and I just looked it up. We had 34, almost 35 minutes of possession to their 26. So we held the ball. If y'all remember, we killed the clock all the way down to the last 2 or 1 second before snapping it. Obviously, that's on purpose. To the team and to Coach Phillips, I'm glad we did that because you didn't want it to be a blowout and you wanted to keep good confidence going to the next week. So it was great that he didn't give them an opportunity. Like Kurt said, for 3 quarters, it was great. And luckily, they didn't have the opportunity to blow the score up because the next week, Western Kentucky went to Ohio State and they hung 63 on those guys. And I think they pulled the starters at halftime. Like it was I think that's what they wanted to do to us, and we didn't let them. Therefore, they had to do it the following week. And like you said, we had the best quarterback on the field that day. That's one takeaway. I looked at Ohio State. I was like, dude, these guys stink. And I don't think they're even there anymore. I think the McCord went to Syracuse, and I don't even know where the other guy with a funny number went.
Devin Brown's still there. Devin Brown's still there. Yeah.
Oh, God. I hope that's not
the number. He's number 33, Kurt.
He is number 33.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Not a funny number.
Is
he
he
also
really?
played defensive end.
Oh, yeah, like a Tommy Zetz number. Yeah, I just remember that. I just remember that their quarterback stunk. But yeah, Ohio State was great, 35-7. We won the spread, Vegas spread, not my spread. So that was really cool to see, and it was very good that Coach Phillips designed the game plan to where we were in the game for 4 quarters, and it really set us off to really kick off the year. But that's all I had for September. Let's move on to October, boys. Unless everyone's good.
October, baby.
October. We opened up October hosting Southern Illinois with a blowout, 31-3. The Penguins win big. Then we traveled to the South Dakota Yotes and lost a heartbreaker, 34-31. Illinois State came to Stanball Stadium. We won 41-38. And then Missouri State also came to Stanball the following week, which we won 44-28. Good month for the Penguins. Went 3-1. I'll kick it off to Dan. What's your takeaway? Take the game that hit you the hardest.
I thought it was Southern Illinois. Based on preseason, I think Southern Ill was supposed to be one of the top teams. I can't remember back that far, but we just thoroughly dominated that game, especially on the line of scrimmage. So I thought it was, after the Northern Iowa loss, to come back and do that to a Missouri Valley team. I mean, 31-3, we just kind of beat their ass. It's been a while since we had done that to a team in the conference. So the rest of the month was crazy. I mean, it was a great month of football. Sal, you just touched on that. But that to me just kind of stood out because, we just handled them. And I thought preseason, am I right, guys? I thought they were ranked kind of high preseason. And
they were a playoff team, and they were
game.
top 10, top 15 all year, and they still got a higher seed than us in the playoffs.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, that game was never, it was just a beatdown. And I thought that was another sign of, man, this team lost a heartbreaker, came back home and throttled a team that was supposed to be better than us. So that game to me just really stood out, and it kind of gave us that feeling. I remember when we were doing the show after the game the following week was like, wow. So everything we did in that game, there weren't a bunch of crazy stats because it wasn't the best night weather-wise, but it was just, I don't know how many sacks we had. We were just, our average field position was like, I think darn near our own 40-some yard line. It was a throttling and something we hadn't done in the conference in a while. So the Saluki win was a big one for me. I think it's Kyle. You're next.
Yeah. So the game that I'm gonna highlight is South Dakota, but to highlight the month of October itself is, we scored on average over 36 points a game. Fantastic month of offensive production. Like Coach Kopp said, to bounce back from that Northern Iowa heartbreaker to just kick Southern Illinois' teeth in is some great discipline from our guys. To Coach Wolf said 24-hour rule, blow it off. We got more games to play. So fantastic that they were able to do that. What we were kind of talking about is, can this team win on the road? And so we go to South Dakota, and we put up 31 points, but we lose another close one on the road. I don't think that our guys were discouraged by that, but it's to win a national championship, which is Youngstown State's goal every year. It's not to win the conference. It's not to get a participation award. We have high standards at YSU. And to win a national championship, you got to win on the road. So, the South Dakota State loss kind of is just very similar to the Northern Iowa loss. Great offensive production, but why are we not able to win the close games on the road? So hopefully they get that figured out this year. I think that was a little bit of a theme that stuck with them this season. And we talk about it. It's hard to win on the road in the Missouri Valley, but South Dakota was another playoff team out of this conference. So, that's the one I was going to highlight.
Curdy.
Yeah, sir. Great points, man. I really circled that game as well. And to add a little bit to the South Dakota, we got down 24-3, And Cyril, I think you had a great point because we averaged so many points offensively, but for like 2.5, 3 quarters that game, it was like, what are we doing? We got to find that identity. And it was almost like from that second half on for the rest of the season, our offense had an identity. So there was a little bit of a defining moment in the season there in South Dakota, which I think kind of leads to my games, which are both the post South Dakota games. Because after South Dakota, we were 3-3. So you guys know what it's like being 3-3 at Youngstown State. Your back's against the wall, right? How many, we've had 3 lost teams miss the playoffs. And so in your head, when you go to bed that night after that loss, you think, damn, are we done? Like, is that it already? And this is only mid-October and we're not making the playoffs. Like, that thought comes in your head to think, we've lost 3 now. We can't lose any more. And to bounce back against Illinois State, who I think was ranked at the time, Illinois State's quarterback, I can't remember if he's coming back or not. I think he threw 5 touchdowns that game. And to win a close one at home, defend home, play Missouri State at home again, defend home again. And we kind of got on a little bit of a run, definitely offensively. We were still giving up some points, but that South Dakota second half moving forward into October kind of sprungboard the offense a little bit, and we found a little bit of an identity. We were able to make adjustments even it during the game, as well as we game planned for the next 2. But that showed the resiliency to me of Coach Phillips' culture, which is we're 3-3, we're 500. Your back's against the wall right now. What are you going to do, and how are you going to respond? And we responded big in October and had 2 big wins at home. So it was a good homestand for us.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned those 2 other games because this time last year, if you looked at this October schedule, the only game I felt confident in was South Dakota. Southern Illinois State, and Missouri State are pretty evenly matched, and those were our 3 wins. But I don't want to go into all of them, but Southern Illinois, I remember, I think you were there, Cyril and Kurt, right? Y'all were in the box, not the lows, the box. And I remember Kaylee and I were in Tallahassee at a Florida State game. It was at 3:30, so we got back to our car at like 6:37, and I put it on my phone to watch it on the drive back to Tampa. And I remember by the time I turned it on, it was over. Like, we had already taken control of the game. And now that we know, that was the game we all know put us in the playoffs, because still in Illinois, the media will have you. Everyone called that like, oh, Southern Illinois is definitely in. And then it was the argument, well, you can't leave Youngstown State out. They kicked their butt, right? So that was our ticket into the postseason. Going on South Dakota, and Cyril and I, we went back at this back when we recapped the game. But if there was 5 quarters, obviously would have won that game. If we would have played the next week, would have won the game, because they played simple, fundamental football. It was the only way they peeled away from us. And as soon as we buckled down, we kicked them right back in the teeth, and we just didn't have enough time to capture the win. But South Dakota, and Dan, we talked about this, they ended up with the number 3 seed. So if we won that game, I'm not saying we would have been the number 3 seed, but we sure as hell would have gotten a bye that first week of the playoffs. So that was huge. And then Illinois State, not enough credit. That was back and forth. Luckily, we came out on top. And the Missouri State is never easy. So glad that we put the capital on that one. But that's my takeaway from October. So Illinois, huge win for the program. That put us in the postseason. Anything else on October? We're moving right around, boys. End of November, last week of the regular season, 3 games at Indiana State, which I remember Curdy definitely had that one highlighted going in. Then we hosted the defending champ, eventual repeat national champ, South Dakota State Jackrabbits, come in and we lose 34-0. I'm sorry, that first game we won 19-7 over Indiana State. Lost the Jackrabbits 34-0. Then at Murray State, which just joined the conference, and we won 34-17 in probably the ugliest game to watch of the year. Cyril, over to you.
Yeah, just to kind of recap the whole month again, and I'm going to highlight once again our loss in that month, which, I hate to be Debbie Downer, but I feel like that's where you take a lot of takeaways and figure out who your team is from some hard losses. Indiana State did not look good offensively. Like Indiana State was in the game pretty much right down to the end. Once again, it was an away game, so scored 19 points. Like why are we struggling on the road? Once again, to emphasize, this is absolutely the best schedule YSU has had in years. We have the defending national champs at home, somewhere where we put up a lot of offensive points, and they blanked us 34-0. Now, I think that if we play this game 10 times, maybe we get a couple wins. I mean, I'm going to give the Jackrabbits their respect. They won 2 national titles. Maybe we can squeak out, 2 wins out of 10. I don't think they blank us the other 8. So it's just one of those games that really was a tough pill to swallow. We couldn't get anything going defensively, offensively, and thankfully it didn't count as 2 losses. It didn't keep us out of the playoffs. But really, if you're looking at the resume, thankfully we did beat down Southern Hill, because if we won a close game against Southern Hill and we get smacked by South Dakota State, they say that what do they call it? The not the fantasy points, but
Quality loss.
The show, not quality loss. It's just a not running up scores, but whatever. Thankfully we had a good quality win, because we really didn't look great against a national contending team. We said at the beginning of the year that's going to be the benchmark on where we stand, especially that late in the season. But thankfully it didn't keep us from our postseason aspirations. But really, it's like we got to figure out something to do to get over that hump. We've talked about the Dakotas are on a different level. Well, we got to get back there. How are we going to do it? What are we going to do? What are our guys doing different in the off season? I mean, everyone has a strength and conditioning program. Everyone's, are we doing our strength and conditioning programs Monday through Thursday and going out drinking Thursday, Friday, Saturday? When are we going to take a next step and say enough's enough? Like, we want to be nationally recognized and on that same level as the Dakotas, because we play them. We get to show what we can do against them every single year. And we didn't play them tough this year, but I think traditionally we always have played the Dakotas pretty tough. We ended up losing close games, but I think we as a team and as a program have to figure out how to take that next step and stay there.
I'll take the next game here, guys. Since I had it highlighted at the beginning of the season with Indiana State being kind of a letdown game, we can kind of highlight that one really quickly. It's one thing, and you should be applauded for going on the road, especially to a place like Indiana State, Terre Haute, Indiana, and going there and getting a win, a big conference win. Again, that was kind of that 3 in a row with backs against the wall. You still have playoff hopes, in your brain a little bit. With South Dakota looming, it was important for us to go there and take care of business. It's not always pretty, especially in this conference, especially on the road. So proud of the team for going there and taking care of business. You can kind of say the same thing for Murray State. I'm not sure if anybody has that one highlighted too, but when your back's against the wall, you've got a couple wins going. You went there. It wasn't completely pretty, but to get a win at Indiana State heading into your biggest game of the year against South Dakota State, felt like that was good, and just kind of continued that run from late October into November into, our biggest game of the year.
Appreciate it, Curdy. My unmute button was not working. I was muted there for a while. Hey, my take is back to South Dakota State just for a measuring stick. After we destroyed the Salukis 31-3, they went to Brookings, South Dakota to play the South Dakota State Jackrabbits, and they had them pinned to the corner. It was 17-10, and Southern Illinois was going in. They were driving down to tie the game on like a 4th and goal. They had an incomplete pass, but just showing you that they're not they're not invincible is what I'm getting at. We just kicked those guys' butts, and they almost went on the road to beat them. Now, one thing, if you guys remember on the South Dakota State game, yes, they were beating us and they had a good handle on us. But if y'all remember, we threw that touchdown pass that after it was thrown or after the snap went, the official blew the whistle a good like 3 seconds late and called it dead. That took the complete wind out of our sail. And if y'all remember, just maybe 2 plays, maybe 3 plays later, the Jackrabbits took it back and scored a touchdown right before half that just really packed it in. If there was any chance of us even keeping that game close, and I'm not making excuses, I'm saying blame the rest, but y'all get the gist. It's just a huge momentum killer. When we lost that momentum, it was done. Murray State, as I mentioned, it was ugly, it was boring, but if you are getting into the playoffs like we did, you don't want to put anything on film anyway. So you want it to be as boring as possible. I'm assuming that was our strategy, or I'm hoping so, because it was ugly. So hope we kept it boring just to keep everything off film, which I guess was the plan. But yeah, Indiana State, I don't know. I don't follow Indiana State, but God, I hope they do something about their offense, because that was painful to watch. If they had any light of offense, they could be dangerous, because their defense is legit. Over to you, DK.
Yeah, I mean, the game I kind of thought was Murray State was the game for me, in the sense of we had to win on the road, late November. I think Coach Phillips, and it probably comes from his time with either Coach Truss or Coach Fickle, he had a saying he would say here locally that September and October is for pretenders, November is for contenders. And we won 2 out of 3 in November, had to. And I know it was kind of a sloppy game, and you go down to Murray State, but they got that. Didn't they have like a horse running around the track at Murray State? Didn't that the white horse? So,
yeah.
I mean, you had to go down there after getting just, beat up by South Dakota State. And, I think it was a sign of where the program is. Kurt mentioned earlier that we were 3-3 after October 14th. And we went on a run. We had to do it, and I thought that was another sign of the team. Hey, we could have went to Murray State and lost, and then we'd be sitting here going, oh, man. But we won, and it was kind of sloppy. But, South Dakota State was I was at that game. I know I was talking with you, Kyle, for a little while. We had guys laying on the field in the fourth quarter. They were just physically beating us up. And to go to, get back on our feet and go on the road and beat Murray State was it was just that another road win in the conference that had to be done. We had to win the game, obviously. And we did. So that one kind of stood out to me, because you just got to take the South Dakota State film after that week and almost throw it away. And Sal, you have a great point. That call was ridiculous, but we just kind of fell apart after that. So,
and I believe to the Murray State, I believe it was the year before that, we were sitting pretty, talking playoffs, and then we went to Missouri State and pooped the bed, if you will. So It was nice to see us go to Murray State and not repeat the same thing where we just kind of looked at the playoffs and overlooked them.
You guys know how hard it is to get on the road in this conference at a place. The month we went to Terre Haute and Murray, Kentucky, come on, man. Those weren't like going to the damn Rose Bowl or anything. So
we were staying at the Marriott, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, they were probably staying at the Racer Inn that who knows what the hell that place was like. So, yeah. Yeah, so bug juice special. So, yeah, that was the game that stood out to me.
Well, if y'all remember, then that Sunday after Murray State was a selection show, which we were chosen to enter the playoffs, and over half our conference made the playoffs, luckily. We were one of the last teams in at large. But before we get into the playoffs, YouTube Live got some good feedback action. Cyril, anything worth noting? You.
Unmute.
You're still muted, so.
Hey, thanks. I never mute myself, and that's why. I'm going to get into Moss's comment after the next section, but Quigley and Crum both said, that SIU game was exciting to watch. We needed it, like we all established after that Northern Iowa heartbreaker, and yeah.
Okay, get into the playoffs real quick. First round, we hosted Duquesne Dukes. We won 40-7. If you guys remember, we had Carmen Brasillo. He was the Giants now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't know this at the time. He was on the Giants then, but he came on our show and recapped that game with us, as that is his alma mater. Then, as we all know, we went to Villanova. I know Kurt and Cyril made the road trip over there. Had delicious concession food from what they tell me. And we lost 45-28. I'm sure we're going to be breaking down the Villanova game in depth as we get closer. As most of you Penguin fans know, we open at Villanova again as we conclude our season with them. We now go there. So breaking down, I guess I'm first. Breaking down that game, obviously, first Duquesne. I get it. If you mentioned March Madness earlier, Dan. If you want to include everyone, then you got to give an auto bid to all the conferences to make it. Why play the game, right? So I get it. They played. It was, I guess, good. I hate that weekend that it's on, which is something that we'll probably talk about another episode because I know things are shifting at the FBS level, and that weekend is the same weekend as rivalry weekend at the FBS level. So it's very hard to draw fans out for that game when Ohio State, Michigan are playing. But glad the team performed regardless. And then at Villanova, even though the score was 45-28, it was one-sided. And I haven't done much research on Villanova, but it sounds like all those boys are coming back. And as we mentioned in a prior show, they are a top 10 preseason. I think they're number 6. So we got to figure something out, use that film, and we definitely got to find a way to climb that mountain. But their quarterback was incredible. Their running back was incredible. And our defense really had no chance against Villanova. And that was one-sided affair from the get-go, unfortunately. There's not much more I could say about that. I mean, we met our match. It wasn't heartbreaking at all. In the fact that we were never better than that team, and I hope this offseason that's what we're building to see. Great measuring stick to play them next year to see if we got that much better.
Yeah, just quick note about Duquesne game. Obviously, the poor attendance was something we, had a couple Instagram comments from that one. Just how sad it was that there's other factors that play into it a little bit, but we've done nothing but hear about how great the home attendance is for playoff games, and that was kind of a bust for us. Potentially, I guess in my opinion, if we were playing somebody that was a little bit more on par, maybe a bigger game, more exciting game, we won 40-7, maybe we would have had a different attendance there. But Sal, I have to agree with you for Villanova. If you just simplify the game a little bit and say offense, defense, and special teams, I don't know if we were better that day in any 3 facets of the game. Special teams too much. I didn't speak too much to special teams, but offensively, I know we had our chances on some 3rd and shorts and 4th and shorts. I know we had a couple mistakes in there that were just mental mistakes where we, dropped the ball, didn't hit a receiver, didn't hit a hole, offensive line. I have to go back and look at the stats to see how they did that day, but Villanova ran the ball. And so you have to give them the edge a little bit in terms of making plays and running the ball on offense and defense. It was something that day. I remember sitting, watching the game in Villanova, and it felt like our offense, you kind of want to get better throughout the year. And our offense kind of did that, and special teams was kind of doing that. And I just don't feel like our defensive backfield and our defense, in the middle had progressed and gotten better. We had good moments specifically against Southern Illinois, but what were we doing to develop and get better as a cohesive unit on defense? And that day it was glaring to us that our defense had really whether it was coaching, strategy, players, this and that. I don't know what was happening on defense, but it was glaring that day that our defense had not gotten better for us throughout the course of the year. And maybe that Duquesne 40-7 win, we might have gone into Villanova a little overconfident there. So in those three facets of the game against Villanova, it's hard to say that we were better in any of them if you simplify it just to those three.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I just kind of summed it up as we got over the playoff hump. I didn't really pick one of the two games, but we got in the playoffs, and it's why the FCS matters, that you can get in the playoffs. And it was, kind of we had a lot of great momentum here in town with media coverage and people being excited and, all that stuff. And then you guys saw the crowd. It was embarrassing. But you guys all brought up a good point. I'm sure, Kyle will probably touch on it. When Ohio State, Michigan, here in Youngstown, you're just not – you can't play. I mean, we should have played the game Friday night. I mean, Duquesne came from Pittsburgh. It wasn't like we should have played it Friday night at 6:30 or Saturday at 11:30 a.m., I guess. I don't know. I mean, we could have played during the Michigan game or after, and you saw what happened after. So that was disappointing, I mean, it was really embarrassing. I think, did they show the crowd? I think from the one camera angle. That's kind of rough, but we got over the hump, man. Coach Phillips got us in the playoffs, and we had been close so many times. So it was just neat to see that. Obviously, we beat Duquesne like South Dakota State beat us, and then, man, I wasn't at the Villanova game. I just couldn't get away at that time. But, like you guys have said, I don't know, man. We didn't convert on a couple of those 3rd and shorts and 4th and short that maybe could have been a little bit of a difference. And I don't know. It just, we looked, I don't know, maybe a little bit flat, and we just couldn't get anything going. And they're a good football team, Is their head coach puts that toothpick in his mouth during the game, right?
He's like that coach off Friday Night Lights. It's got
yes, with the lollipop.
Dude, I got to admit, that drove me crazy. That just drove me crazy, man. We gotta get that toothpick out of his mouth, man.
Yeah, you remind me of this like a high school coach, but he was kicking our butts. It was like, this guy,
I'm trying to crap on that score, 45-28. I remember it looks a lot better than what it was. We were down.
Yeah.
We were down more than that. I think we scored 1 or 2 touchdowns late after a stop, and that kind of made it look a little bit more respectable. But Villanova had some dogs, man.
Yeah, he wasn't even nervous. He didn't have to go to a new toothpick for the second half. So, So I don't know what the hell that even means. But I just was excited. We made the playoffs. We got there, and we'll see what happens. So that was my gear grinder for you there, Kyle. So go ahead, bro.
Yeah, no. So once again, credit to Coach Phillips. He kind of got set up behind the 8 ball when he took over this program, hit COVID. You lose a lot of recruiting momentum, all kinds of things. So the fact that, he was able to get us into the playoffs and get us a playoff win is great. Once again, I'll touch on it. We've kind of touched on stadium attendance all year. There's a lot of different factors in that. I will disagree with Kurt in saying that, you would expect it to be more full with like a higher caliber team coming in. But the fact that Duquesne is 60 minutes down the road, a little bit of a crosstown rivalry. I think the schools are close enough that they're going to recruit against each other. The fans should get out and support them. I can't remember. I think it was a little bit of a cold, wet night. But regardless, it's playoff football in Youngstown. We haven't seen it often. 16, and before that, Kurt and mine's teams fell 1 game short 2 years in a row, and so really you don't get that many opportunities to watch your team in the postseason and take it for granted. So, and then just talking about the Wildcat game, the Villanova game, Quigley wants to know who's going on that revenge tour. I don't know yet. That drive across PA and into Philadelphia is absolutely garbage. I hate it. It's boring. It's long. And then Philadelphia is like a complete shit show. Just traffic sucks. So I don't know. I mean, there was at one point, there was like Kurt and I were on like a 5-lane highway, and it immediately shrunk down into a 2-lane easy pass. And we were like, this is terrible. Not football related. I just hate this. I just hate the city of Philadelphia. I'm sorry, Christian Brian. I'm my bad, bro. I just don't like it. But
he hooked us up with the crab fries, though.
He did tell us to get the crab fries. 10 out of 10 recommendation there with the cheese sauce. I'm gonna jump on Moss's point that I saved for this segment. Is he said this is the most important game that we had all year because we open up with them. We've touched on that. He thinks we came out a little conservative for the playoff game, but really, to your point, Sal, like, what are we going to do to get better? And I'm pretty sure I don't think they lost many, if any, guys to transfers or anything like that. Maybe a couple guys graduated, but that team's pretty much back and locked and loaded. And those guys don't have a goal to make the playoffs. That Villanova team has a goal to win a national championship because, they went and got beat pretty handedly by South Dakota State, but they earned the right to be on the field with South Dakota State. So they're ramping up. They're getting geared up. They're trying to get better and get on South Dakota State's level. So really, if we're trying to get on Villanova's level, we're going to be that much further behind. So once again, we have to get on South Dakota State's level somehow, some way this summer. And, I'm excited. I haven't dug into any of the spring game stuff, any of the new guys, because, you guys know me in the thread. Anytime we get a, guy leaving in the portal and stuff, it's just, I get heated.
Grinds his gears.
Coach. Yeah, grinds my gears. And Strollo's like, you just have to understand that that's where the game's going. And I agree. I do understand where the game is going. I just highly disagree with it. So, it's like, and we've always had the mentality of next man up and, teams reload and a new guy has an opportunity to prove himself and play just as good or better than the guy that he replaced. So, it'll be exciting to jump into that going into this offseason and summer when we get talking about, next season. I just not mentally there yet. So
one more thing on comment on Villanova for me, and it's really recapping the whole season. Y'all know I hate the SEC and I live among a lot of SEC people, but I never felt more like an SEC fan going into that Villanova game thinking, I'm from the Missouri Valley. They're from the CAA. They don't even deserve to be, in the playoffs with us was kind of my mindset. And then we showed up and they kicked our butt. And now Strollo has us playing against them next year, CAA. He has Towson lined up the following year, another CAA team. So I was quickly humbled by the CAA. I guess they got some talent out there. And it's just funny to look at the games that we felt – if you listen to our 2023 preview and how some of this stuff shook out, it's kind of funny how you really don't know. I guess that's why Vegas.
Well, you got to remember, Sal.
We don't.
Villanova is a program with tradition, and I remember getting recruited by Villanova. I didn't know anything about Villanova when I was getting recruited by them. I was like, you guys are a basketball school. I step on campus in 2009 and Villanova wins the national championship. So I'm like, oh, shoot, maybe I messed up. I could have a ring right now. But then so it's a program with a lot of tradition. And like I said, those guys are going to be gearing up for a national championship run, not a playoff run. And I think that's
100% this year. But the whole East Coast doesn't really play FCS football. Yeah, when I say that, and then we went out there and got our butts kicked, it made me think, well, maybe the East Coast has some teams.
Well, I think maybe look at it this.
When you talk about like Delaware and James Madison and
all
like
down the Atlantic,
I would say they're top heavy. I don't think they have as much as like we have or maybe some other teams, but like the teams that they had traditionally, I don't know about Villanova past like 2009, but like Delaware was killing it for a long time. James Madison was running in that conference. And Old Dominion, right? Old Dominion had made the jump up to FBS. So they were top heavy in my opinion. I always felt like they had 4 or 5.
Yeah,
really
they all
good
left
teams.
or they're leaving.
And yeah, to your point, more than half of them have left, right?
And I think it's, you think about Villanova and Kyle brought up a good point. Their tradition goes back to, the 91 title team. If Herb Williams doesn't make a miracle catch and Jeff Wilkins kick a field goal, YSU never wins their first national championship. 97, they were beating YSU's doors off at Villanova, and YSU came back and beat them, and to go on to win another national title. So, and Villanova in that area, who are they recruiting against? We're here in Ohio, and YSU, everyone wants to go to the MAC, and then we get them, and they've got that New Jersey, Philly, PA area all around there.
Rutgers.
They're recruiting against basketball. That's what they're
Rutgers
recruiting
and Boston
against.
College.
They're recruiting against Rutgers and Pitt, and that's probably it. Maybe West Virginia.
And we're dealing with Akron, Kent, OU, Miami, Bowling Green, all that bullshit. So I just think, they're sorry. So grinding
That's
gears.
So true, though. It's so true.
It's just
getting caught.
I just think that Villanova has a lot of tradition, and now they got a dang toothpick tradition. So I'm getting fired up. It's only June 26th.
Us three are all rocking toothpicks the next podcast.
Hey, we're 64 days away from kickoff, man. It's happening quick.
Yep.
Anyway, any last well, I guess before we wrap up and talk about last comments, Kurt on IG, Cyril on YouTube Live, anything to share?
Yeah, just a couple comments, a couple messages we got from DBYSU, just about the poor attendance. We kind of hit on that a little bit. And moving on to Quiggs. Quiggs kind of gave us something a little bit more of a positive spin on 2023, hoping that is the new standard, which all four of us, I think, is hoping the same thing. I think to Coach Kopp's point, we kind of got over that hump. Now this is our bar. Now this is where we get to every year. And then we're fighting for what's beyond that. Kyle kind of talked a little bit about that too. Give a shout out to Mets. First time getting in the FCS playoffs since 2016. We hit that. That's definitely a positive from 2023. Moss's comment, I'm going to leave for somebody else. He may have talked it. It's way, way more in depth, which is we lost a ton from this 2023 team. So I don't even want to talk about 2024 yet, but a lot of our players that were really productive for us in 2023 are no longer with the program or on the roster, whether they've graduated or whether they've transferred, specifically some stronger defensive players, as well as a receiver or two and a couple of other people on offense, whether it's graduation or portal. That's probably more for a 2024 episode, but shout out to Moss. You are absolutely correct.
Yeah, so jumping in on YouTube. Yeah, Moss is in here. He's fired up. He's got the same sentiments. He's, what is this team going to look like next year? Once again, to Kurt's point, that's a different show. That's for a 2024 show. But somebody's got to fact check. No, he couldn't wait for us to graduate. He told us one meeting.
So, you guys are sitting in here pissed off, ready to go play again.
But somebody fact check Moss. I don't know this, and once again, this is gonna be a how bad do you want it? What are you gonna do different across the country? Apparently, I don't know if it's an NCAA thing, a university thing. I'm not putting any. This is Moss. They're not testing for weed anymore, apparently. So I don't know. Is that going to be your priority? Are you guys going to be worried about your status as a football player and partying, or you're going to try and do something with it? Because, they tell you when you come in, don't leave with any regrets. And, Kurt and I still have a beer or a whiskey and sit and think like, man, we were that close. We were, and unfortunately, we're one game out of playoffs. We're not talking about like we lost a close playoff game. Kurt and I are talking about, how junior year, senior year, we feel like we got robbed out of our playoff opportunity. And are you gonna live with that and be like, yeah, we were so damn good, but we just fell short? Like Well, the teams that fall short don't get remembered, unfortunately.
I will. I'll
I
follow
guess
up,
That's all I'm
Cyril.
gonna. That's
I'll follow up, Cyril, and I will say it looks like what Moss is claiming is accurate. The NCAA Division I Council voted Tuesday to remove cannabis from the banned drug class for NCAA championships and postseason football effective immediately, and that is from 12 hours ago.
yeah. So I mean, there's got to be a. Listen. I'm not anti-marijuana. I'm not anti-drinking, but if that's going to be your priority, then I don't believe you're going to be successful in achieving an ultimate goal if that's what you look forward to after practice. And that's what I'm going to leave it at that.
I guess I'd like to be curious to see, maybe if that's what happens nowadays. But wonder how many South Dakota State guys tested positive for weed. I don't know. Maybe 20, maybe none. I don't know. But what was the old adage? Whether it was a Coach Saban or I think it was a Wolf or maybe any coach, your body is your business, right? If you're a Division I athlete and you want to get to the next level or you want to make the playoffs, you want to win the Missouri Valley Conference, I don't know if drugs prevent you or makes that happen. I don't know. You guys were former Division I athletes, and I don't know. Maybe the focus should be on.
I don't know. Maybe
just like
who knows?
anything
maybe
else
it'll
in the
be a
world,
good
it
thing.
could be both sides, right? I mean, some would argue.
Yeah, think about how many.
with
Think about how
cannabis,
many
this is gonna
great
help me
players we
recover
would have.
better.
Or think about how many great players would have been kicked off our teams for failing drug tests, right?
Oh, I mean, it's been, I'm sure that it happens everywhere, but the focus is, like you guys said, what are we doing every day so we can go beat Villanova here in, what is it, Sal, 64 days? So
Yeah.
I don't know if we're worried about drug testing and man, I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully we're just.
These boys have 4 weeks and they're in camp. I mean, think
Right.
about it.
That's crazy, isn't it? When they start camp early, we play on a Thursday.
Yeah, and so really, like, we're unfortunately living vicariously through these players, this roster, and we've all bled and sweat for this program, and we want to see them win and achieve that ultimate goal. But unfortunately, like, we don't get to, be a part of it in terms of like working with them and taking care of our business. We just have to hope that they're taking care of their business.
Of course. That's why we have a podcast.
We'll take care of
it. Wrapping up, just one more note on Moss. Phenomenal curler, by the way. You'll probably see him in the Winter Olympics coming up.
Moss,
anyone could be a guest on the show. But by the way, please follow us on Instagram, Whitetown Penguin Podcast. When I say anyone that's I don't want to say worthy of, but if you have something YSU related to share that really the YSU football community needs to know or would like to know, definitely hit us on Instagram. And this is the time, the off season is definitely the time to have guests on. We definitely have a very special guest, the king of YSU. When you think of YSU, that is the icon. That will be announced later. You got to follow our Instagram page, know who it is and when he's coming on. But it will definitely be coming before the season. So definitely something to be excited and look out for. Before I shut it down, any other more comments? Any last thoughts before shutting it down? All right, boys.
No, I'm driving.
Let's lock it up. Lock it up. Again, this is the Youngstown Penguin Football Podcast. Please follow us on Instagram, Whitetown Penguin Podcast, and we will see when we'll be on next. We have the 2024 preview and power rankings of the Missouri Valley Football Conference ahead. But again, thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Salgado. That's Kyle Searle. That's Dan Kopp. That's Kurt Hess. Thank you for tuning in. And again, go Penguins.